Zophar's claim that the suffering is a result of something Job has not repented of. But that's wrong, so we'll see that. In Job 21 it says, Then Job replied, Listen carefully to my words. Let this be the consolation you give me. Bear with me while I speak, and after I have spoken, mock on. Is my complaint directed to man? Why should I not be impatient? Look at me and be astonished. Clap your hands over your mouth. When I think about this, I am terrified. Trembling seizes my body. Why do the wicked live on, growing old and increasing in power? They see their children established around them, their offspring before their eyes. Their homes are safe and free from fear. The rod of God is not upon them, apparently. Their bulls never fail to breed. Their cows calve and do not miscarry. They send forth their children as the flock. Their little ones dance about. They sing to the music of tambourine and harp. They make merry to the sound of the flute. They spend their years in prosperity and go down to the grave in peace. Yet they say to God, Leave us alone. We have no desire to know your ways. Who is the Almighty that we should serve him? What would we gain by praying to him? But their prosperity is not in their own hands. So I stand aloof from the counsel of the wicked. Yet how often is the lamp of the wicked snuffed out? How often does calamity come upon them? The fate God allots in his anger, how often are they like straw before the wind, like chaff swept away by a gale? It is said, God stores up a man's punishment for his sons. Let him repay the man himself, so that he will know it. Let his own eyes see his destruction. Let him drink of the wrath of the Almighty. For what does he care about the family he leaves behind when his allotted months come to an end? Can anyone teach knowledge to God, since he judges even the highest? One man dies in full vigor, completely secure and at ease, his body well nourished, his bones rich with marrow. Another man dies in bitterness of soul, never having enjoyed anything good. Side by side they lie in the dust, and worms cover them both. I know full well what they are thinking, the schemes by which you would wrong me. You say, Where now is the great man's house, the tents where the wicked man lived? Have you ever questioned those who travel? Have you paid no regard to the accounts that the evil man is spared from the day of calamity, that he is delivered from the day of wrath? Who denounces his conduct to his face? Who repays him for what he has done? He is carried to the grave, and watches kept over his womb. The soil in the valley is sweet to him. All men follow after him, and a countless throng goes before him. So how can you console me with your nonsense? Nothing is left of your answers but falsehood. So that's quite powerful. So let's dig into what it's saying here. So expositionally, let's look at verses 1 through 5, which seems to be saying that it's a plea to be heard. He's trying to be heard here. Listen carefully to my words. In verse 2, let this be the consolation you give me. So Job begins with this plea. It's just listen to this, He's not asking for solutions or theology, just attention and respect. That's what he's calling for. And sometimes the best gift we can give someone in their pain is just simply to be present around them, to listen, not to answer anything. So in verse 6 he says, "When I think about this, I am terrified. Trembling seizes my body." Well, this reality that Job is about to speak shakes him. So evil people can prosper while the righteous suffer. That's not just confusing, it's also disturbing. So in verses 7 through 16, we see the prosperity of the wicked. Why do the wicked live on, growing old and increasing in power? Verse 7. So this is the heart of Job's argument. He looks around and sees many people who just do not honor God, yet their lives appear blessed. The powerful image in verse 9, which says, "Their homes are safe and free from fear. The rod of God is not on them." Peaceful, it's peaceful imagery, prosperous home, and that's untouched by divine discipline. The meaning here is the wicked sometimes enjoy peace while the righteous endure storms. So can we reflect here on, while Job is dismantling this simplistic worldview that good equals reward and evil equals punishment. Life doesn't always follow that pattern. So they say in verse 14, it says, they say to God, "Leave us alone. We have no desire to know your ways." Here's that tragedy, that they reject God and still seem to thrive. It shakes Job's sense of justice. And then later in verses 17 through 21, we see challenging the standard view of judgment. He's challenging that. And yet, in verse 17, he says, "Yet how often is the lamp of the wicked snuffed out?" Zophar claims the wicked perish quickly. But that's not what Job sees. Job sees many people who aren't following God, still being prosperous, still living old lives. Job counters, really, how often does that actually happen? So the powerful imagery in verse 19, you say God stores up the punishment of the wicked for their children. Now, deferred judgment is this imagery. So stored up for another generation. And now, what does this mean, really? Job questions whether that's just. Why should someone else suffer for another's evil? So here we're getting at that it is because someone else is evil that I'm suffering, and that was the same with Christ. When Jesus was crucified, it was the sins of the Jewish people who brought them over, or handed them over to the Romans to be crucified. And it was Judas who betrayed Jesus. His evil was what harmed Jesus, his innocence, right? So here we see just exactly that picture. Job is realizing, well, that people sometimes are suffering because of someone else's wickedness, and he's trying to grapple with that justice, and what's God doing about that. But in verses 22 through 26, he's talking about how death comes to all. So in verses 23 and then a little bit later at 25, he says, "One person dies in full vigor, completely secure and at ease. Another dies in bitterness of soul." So Job levels the playing field. In the end, death comes to all, regardless of how they lived. So the image here, side by side in verse 26, side by side they lie in the dust. The worms cover them both. So we have the imagery here, the grave as the great equalizer. The wealth, health, and status, they all can't prevent death. Everyone will die at some point. So this is a humbling truth. No matter our circumstances, we are all going to face the same end. Now the question becomes, how do we live well in the meantime? So, verses 27 through 34 talks about Job's final rebuke. I know full well that you are thinking, or what you are thinking in verse 27. Job anticipates the argument. His friends will still try to explain away his suffering, but he's no longer debating. He's exposing their error at this point. So, in verse 34 he says, so how can you console me with your nonsense? Nothing is left of your answers but falsehood. He ends with the stringing truth. Their arguments may sound religious, but they're empty. So we can reflect on this by how, like, people who are in pain, they can spot fake comfort pretty quickly. So what they need is the truth with love, not logic without compassion. So don't try to logic your way through explaining someone's pain. Just walk alongside them. Give them truth with love. So how can we apply all this chapter? Well, I have 3 points. Number 1 is faith must acknowledge hard questions. Job doesn't deny God. He questions him, and that's okay. He didn't deny God. He was questioning him. The real faith isn't blind. It wrestles. It asks hard questions. And God is not threatened by our doubts. He knows our hearts fully. Why would he question our doubts? He would understand them. The second thing is be honest about the brokenness of life. Now, Job names a difficult truth. Sometimes the wicked prosper. Pretending otherwise doesn't help it. It only distances us from those who are struggling. So let your theology be honest and grounded in the Word of God, okay? Life is complex, and God's justice is often displayed, but it's not absent. It's not like he's not storing up wrath for the wicked. So comfort, number 3. Comfort should be rooted in compassion, not assumption. So Job's friends tried to comfort him with correctness, but what he needed was kindness. When people suffer, start with empathy. You don't need all the answers. They don't need all the answers either. And you just need a listening ear and a merciful heart. So, to kind of encourage us as we move on from that chapter, 21 is a powerful reality check. It reminds us that we live in a broken world where justice isn't always immediate and blessings don't always reflect righteousness. But here's the encouragement. So God sees, God knows, and while we may not always understand his timing, we can trust his heart. Like Job, we've invited the wrestle with the life unfairness while still holding on to faith. And in Jesus, we find the ultimate proof that God enters our suffering, and one day he will make all things right.